My name is Emma, I'm 42, and I discovered my husband wasn't just cheating on me, he was systematically stealing my life's work to build a future with his mistress. Before I tell you how I used his own arrogance to burn that future to the ground, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It all started to unravel on a Tuesday, one of those gray, drizzly October days where the sky feels like a damp wool blanket. For weeks, maybe even months, a subtle wrongness had permeated our lives. It was like a low-grade fever I couldn't shake. Mark, my husband of 4 years, had become a ghost in our apartment. The man I married, the one with the easy laugh and the habit of leaving his socks on the floor, was gone. In his place was a tense, irritable stranger who used a brutal quarter at the office as a shield for everything. His increasingly late nights, which I had once met with a sympathetic back rub and a warm plate of food, now felt hollow, echoing in the quiet of our home. That afternoon, I was trying to work, staring at a spreadsheet until the numbers blurred. A cheerful little ping from my phone broke the silence. It was a notification from our shared family cloud storage. We'd set it up years ago to share vacation photos with our parents. The notification read, "New photos have been uploaded." A knot of ice formed in my stomach. It made no sense. Mark was supposedly chained to his desk in back-to-back meetings. I certainly hadn't uploaded anything. My hand felt strangely heavy as I navigated to the app. My thumb hovered over the screen, a sense of dread so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing on my chest. I think a part of me already knew. A part of me had known for a long time. I tapped the folder. And the world didn't just tilt. It shattered. The photos weren't of sunsets or family gatherings. They were selfies. A whole series of them. Mark, grinning that charming, lopsided grin I fell in love with, had his arm wrapped tightly around Sarah, a junior executive from his marketing firm. They were in a hotel room. I could tell by the cheap, generic art on the wall and the impersonal beige comforter. In one photo, she was wearing his crisp, white dress shirt, one I had just ironed for him 2 days before, and absolutely nothing else. In another, they were kissing, their eyes closed in feigned ecstasy, a half-empty bottle of champagne sitting on the nightstand behind them. I couldn't breathe. It was a physical sensation, a punch to the sternum that stole all the air from my lungs. Every memory from the last 9 years, 4 of marriage, 5 of dating, flashed through my mind, but they were now corrupted, rewritten by this new, ugly truth. Our first apartment, the trips we took, the promises we made under starry skies, it all felt like a movie I'd been watching about someone else's life. I just sat there, frozen, staring at the smiling face of the man who slept in my bed every night. I didn't cry. Not then. A strange, terrifying calm washed over me, a defense mechanism my body threw up against the sheer magnitude of the pain. And in that silence, one thought rose above the screaming chaos in my head. It wasn't why. It was how much. How much of my life, my love, my trust, was a complete and utter lie. The past began to spool out in my mind, replaying itself in this harsh new light. I remembered the good times, and that somehow made it worse. I thought about 2 years ago, when I was a nervous wreck before a huge pitch for my own freelance consulting business. Mark had been my rock. He'd stayed up with me until 2 a.m., making flashcards, quizzing me, playing the role of the skeptical client. "You've got this, Em," he'd said, holding my face in his hands. "You're the smartest person in any room you walk into. Never forget that." His belief in me had been my armor. Now, that memory felt like a calculated act of manipulation. Then I thought of a more recent memory, just a few months back. He'd come home one night, stressed and frantic about a massive, make-or-break account at his firm. The project was code-named Pegasus, and he was completely stuck. "I can't find the angle, Em," he'd lamented, pacing our living room. "The client is old school, but they need to connect with a younger market. It's impossible." I wanted to help. I loved him. My entire career was in brand strategy, this was a puzzle I knew how to solve. I spent the next 2 days obsessively working on it, filling a yellow legal pad with notes and diagrams. I came up with a unique, multi-layered approach, a strategy that hinged on community-focused viral marketing and authentic storytelling to bridge the generational gap. It was complex, it was nuanced, and I knew in my bones it would work. That weekend, I walked him through the entire thing over coffee. His eyes, which had been dull with worry, lit up with a fire I hadn't seen in months. He grabbed my hands from across the table, his grip tight. You're a genius," he breathed, his face full of what I, in my naivety, mistook for awe and admiration. "This is it. This is the key that unlocks everything." He was adamant that I email him the detailed notes. "I need it in your words," he'd urged. "You're my secret weapon." So I did. I spent hours typing up a 6-page document, pouring all my expertise and insight into it. I felt proud. I felt like his partner, an indispensable part of his success. The memory now made me physically ill. And with that illness came other, sharper memories. The subtle digs. The dismissiveness. Just last month, I'd landed my biggest client yet. When I told him the news, bubbling with excitement, he'd barely looked up from his phone. "That's great, hon," he'd mumbled, before immediately pivoting. "God, you wouldn't believe the day I had. The pressure on this Pegasus thing is unreal." He made my victory feel small, insignificant. When I got my year-end bonus, he joked about it being play money compared to his salary and the massive promotion he was banking on after Pegasus. He was systematically diminishing me, and I had let him. The calm in my veins began to solidify, turning from ice into something harder, sharper. Something like steel. I had to get out. I couldn't spend another night in that apartment, breathing the same air as his lies, sleeping in a bed that was a stage for his deceit. My mind, now shockingly clear, raced for a lifeline, a safe harbor in the storm. And then, a name surfaced from the depths of my memory, Ray. Ray was my mother's oldest and dearest friend. After she passed away from cancer 5 years ago, I'd lost touch with him, aside from the obligatory exchange of Christmas cards. But she had made me promise, on one of her last good days, that if I ever truly needed help, I would call him. "He's as solid as the mountains he lives on, Emma," she had whispered. He was a gruff, kind-hearted widower who owned a small, secluded farm up in the mountains, a 3-hour drive from the city. He wasn't a stranger. He was a legacy of my mother's love, a promise I had to keep. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial, but I found his number. There was a pause on the line after I introduced myself, then his warm, gravelly voice, unchanged by time. "Emma." "Good Lord, child. I was just thinking about your mother this morning. Is everything all right?" And for the first time since seeing those photos, the dam broke. A single, hot tear rolled down my cheek, followed by another. "No, Ray," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed grief. "Nothing is all right." I didn't have to explain. He seemed to understand everything. "Your mom always said you were tougher than you looked," he said gently. "I have a small guest cabin on the property. It's got its own kitchen and everything. The key is under the blue flower pot on the porch. Come home, child. Just come home." That night, under the cloak of darkness, I packed a single suitcase. And I made a vow. There would be no screaming matches. No dramatic confrontations. That's what he would want. He would twist my righteous anger and pain into hysteria, painting me as the unstable one. No. My revenge would be the one thing a narcissist like him could never handle: silence. I was going to disappear from his life so completely that he wouldn't even know I was gone until he was standing in the rubble. The next few weeks were a surreal exercise in methodical deception. I became a spy in my own life. I'd drive down from the soul-soothing quiet of Ray's farm every morning, right after I knew Mark had left for work. I'd use the spare key I'd always kept in my car to let myself into the apartment. The place that was once my sanctuary now felt like a crime scene, and I was the forensic expert, bagging and tagging the evidence of a life that was now over. Box by box, I packed up everything that was mine. It was a slow, agonizing process. Each object was a fresh stab of betrayal. My collection of classic novels. The ridiculous World's Best Wife mug he'd given me as a joke. My mother's inheritance, not of money, but of old photos, worn recipes, and a few pieces of delicate jewelry. Packing her things hurt the most. It felt like I was letting her down somehow. At one point, I found a framed photo from our wedding. We looked so young, so hopeful. I sank to the floor, the photo clutched in my hand, and sobbed until my ribs ached. I wanted to give up, to just run away and leave it all behind. But then, the image of his smiling face next to Sarah's in that cheap hotel room flashed in my mind, and the grief hardened once more into cold, diamond-hard resolve. I wasn't just packing. I was digging. Fueled by a quiet fury, I logged into our shared accounts. His password for everything was our anniversary, a detail so cruelly ironic it made me want to scream. The digital trail he'd left was staggering. I found credit card statements filled with charges I couldn't explain, a $400 charge at a high-end lingerie store I'd never set foot in, a weekend spa package for two at a resort upstate, dozens of dinners at romantic restaurants he'd always claimed were too stuffy for us. He was living a completely separate, lavish life, and he was funding it with our joint account. The final, gut-wrenching piece of the puzzle fell into place when I decided to check his work computer, which he often left on at home. Tucked away in his project folder was the final presentation for Project Pegasus. My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it. The feeling was beyond sickness. It was an erasure. Page after page, my ideas, my strategies, my very words were laid out in crisp, corporate slides. It was my work, my intellectual property, polished and presented as his own. And at the bottom of the title page, a final, brutal insult, Mark Reynolds, Senior VP. Sarah Connolly, Junior Executive. They were a team. He had stolen my mind to build a future with her. The secret weapon he had praised was just ammunition he had pilfered for his new life. That was the moment the last flicker of love and doubt was extinguished forever. This was no longer just about a broken heart. This was about grand larceny. This was about justice. I meticulously downloaded everything. The incriminating statements, the hotel receipts, the chat logs between him and Sarah that I found on a forgotten social media app. And most importantly, I downloaded his Pegasus presentation and saved it right next to the original 6-page document I had emailed him months before. The evidence was irrefutable. I put it all on a single, encrypted USB drive. It felt heavy in my hand, like the weight of a decade of lies. My chance came a week later. Mark called, his voice breezy and oblivious from an airport lounge. "Hey, hon. Just letting you know I'm heading out for that conference in Chicago. Be gone for 3 days. Try not to miss me too much." "Okay," I said, my voice a perfect imitation of a loving wife. "Have a safe trip." "Love you," he said, the words casual, meaningless. The line went dead. I didn't say it back. The moment I knew his plane was in the air, I moved. I hired a small moving company Ray knew, two quiet, efficient men who asked no questions. In 2 days, we cleared out everything that was mine. When they drove away, I stood in the doorway of the now cavernous apartment. It felt like a museum of a dead relationship. All his things were there, but the soul of the place was gone. On the polished surface of the coffee table, in the exact center of the room where he would be sure to see it, I placed my diamond wedding ring. Next to it, I left a small, white card. On it, I had written just 3 words. "I know everything." Then I walked out, closed the door on 9 years of my life, and never once looked back. The storm broke with the force of a Category 5 hurricane the moment Mark's plane landed and he walked into that empty apartment. My phone, which I had purposefully left on, began to self-destruct. The initial texts were confused, almost comical. "Where are all your things? Did we get robbed? Call me." The confusion quickly morphed into panic when he saw the ring and the note. The calls started, one after another, a relentless assault. I sat in the profound quiet of Ray's guest cabin, the crickets chirping outside, and let each call go to voicemail. Listening to his voice, once a source of comfort, was now a clinical study in narcissistic collapse. The first few voicemails were pleading. "Emma, baby, please, what's going on? Whatever this is, we can fix it. Just talk to me." When pleading didn't work, he switched to gaslighting. "Are you having some kind of breakdown? You've been under so much stress. You're not thinking clearly. This is crazy." Then came the anger. "Emma, I swear to God, you pick up this phone right now. What the hell is going on? You can't just leave. You don't get to do this to me." And finally, the partial confession, wrapped in blame. "Okay, fine. Something happened with Sarah. It was a mistake. A stupid, one-time mistake, and it meant nothing. Is that what this is about? You're throwing away our marriage over one mistake? After all the times you've been away on your work trips, leaving me alone? This is your fault too." I listened to each message with a detached calm, then deleted it. He was following a predictable, pathetic script. He didn't text or call again for a few hours. I knew he was making other calls, trying to find me. Soon enough, my phone buzzed with a call from Jessica, our mutual best friend. I took a deep breath and answered. "Emma. Oh my God, are you okay? Mark just called me, he sounds completely frantic. He said you're gone." This was the hard part. "I'm fine, Jess," I said, keeping my voice even. I needed some space. I'm taking some time for myself." "Space? What are you talking about? He said your things are gone. Did something happen?" "We're just going through some things," I lied, hating how it sounded. "Please, just tell him I'm safe and I'll call when I'm ready." She was hurt, I could hear it in her voice. But she was my friend. "Okay, Emma. If you say so. But I'm worried about you." Hanging up felt like another small betrayal, but it was necessary. I couldn't risk anyone knowing where I was. That night, I sat at the small wooden desk in the cabin, the encrypted USB drive plugged into my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank email screen. This was the final step. This was the point of no return. I looked at the little plastic drive, the digital bomb I had built. A wave of fear washed over me. I was about to detonate a man's life. The life of a man I had once vowed to love and cherish. Was this who I was now? Vengeful? Cold? I closed my eyes and thought of my mother. I remembered her quiet strength, her unwavering sense of right and wrong. She would never have stood for this kind of deceit. She would have fought back, not with screams, but with intelligence and dignity. This wasn't vengeance. It was a consequence. This wasn't just about a personal affair, it was about professional theft and a profound breach of trust. It was the final, necessary act of my divorce, not just from a man, but from the woman I had become with him, small, quiet, and accommodating. My fingers flew across the keyboard. The email was not addressed to Mark. The recipients were the CEO of his company and the head of their legal department. The subject line was simple: confidential concern regarding Project Pegasus and employee conduct. The email itself was short, clinical, and professional. I wrote it as an anonymous but deeply concerned party with inside knowledge. I stated that I had irrefutable evidence that the Pegasus project, currently being championed by Senior VP Mark Reynolds, was built on stolen intellectual property. Furthermore, I stated that Mr. Reynolds and his junior project partner, Sarah Connolly, were engaged in an inappropriate relationship that represented a serious conflict of interest, compromised the project's integrity, and exposed the company to potential legal risk. I attached 2 password-protected PDF files. Exhibit_A_employee_conduct.pdf exhibit_B_intellectual_property_theft.pdf. I provided the password in the body of the email. I read it over one last time. It was perfect. Then, with a final, steadying breath, I moved the cursor and clicked send. The sound of the click seemed to echo in the small cabin. A few days later, a local process server, arranged by my new lawyer, delivered the divorce papers to Mark at his office. The chaos on his end was immediate, but for me, it was a distant noise, like thunder from a storm miles away. I had a new phone number. I had a new, quiet life. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt the calm, steady hum of peace. I didn't know it then, but the storm was just taking a breath. The real hurricane was still gathering strength out at sea. A year can feel like a lifetime. In the 12 months that followed my escape, I went from a shattered, heartbroken refugee to the quiet, confident architect of my own life. The mountains worked their magic. The crisp air, the scent of pine, the steady, honest work of tending to Ray's small farm and garden, it all served to ground me, to wash away the grime of Mark's betrayal. I started a small business from the cabin's sun-drenched kitchen, making artisanal jams and preserves from the wild berries and local fruits. It wasn't a high-powered, corner office career, but it was mine. It was tangible and real. I had also met someone. Daniel. He owned a local coffee shop, a kind, gentle man with laugh lines etched around his eyes and a dusting of flour always on his apron. Our relationship grew slowly, organically, like a seedling sprouting in healthy soil. It was built on long conversations over steaming mugs of coffee and peaceful walks on sun-dappled mountain trails. It was everything my marriage to Mark hadn't been: easy, respectful, and honest. My divorce from Mark had been finalized 6 months earlier. It was an uncontested, clean break. I'd heard whispers through the grapevine of old friends. Mark had been fired in disgrace after a brutal internal investigation. Sarah had been demoted and unceremoniously transferred to a satellite office in the middle of nowhere. Project Pegasus, his golden ticket, had been scrapped entirely. I felt a quiet, grim sense of justice, but I didn't dwell on it. His life was no longer my story. Or so I thought. The past came crashing into the present on a bright Saturday afternoon at the town's annual craft fair. My booth, Mountain Harvest, was bustling. I was laughing, handing a customer a jar of my sunrise peach jam, feeling a sense of simple, profound joy. Daniel was helping me, his easy presence a comfort at my side. The sun was warm, the air filled with the happy sounds of the community and the sweet scent of cinnamon and pine. I felt at peace. And then I saw him. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, a specter from another life. It was Mark. He was thinner, his expensive suits replaced by wrinkled khakis and a faded polo shirt. The arrogant swagger I had known so well was gone, replaced by a desperate, haunted look that turned my stomach to ice. He started walking towards me, his eyes locked on mine. Daniel saw the color drain from my face and put a protective hand on my arm. Emma? Who is that? My ex-husband, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. Mark stopped directly in front of my booth, completely ignoring Daniel. His eyes, once full of charm, were now filled with a toxic cocktail of remorse and resentment. Emma, he said, his voice raspy. I finally found you. I would later learn the full extent of his manipulation. He had called Jessica, our old mutual friend, weaving a desperate tale about how he was worried I was in some kind of trouble, that he just needed to know I was safe. Jessica, with her kind heart, had fallen for it and told him which mountain town I'd moved to. Another person caught in the web of his lies. What do you want, Mark? I asked. My voice was steady, colder than a mountain stream in winter. He launched into a well-rehearsed monologue, a torrent of apologies. He was sorry. He was a fool. He had made the biggest mistake of his life. He told me about losing his job, painting himself as the victim of a corporate witch hunt triggered by a malicious anonymous tip. He detailed how Sarah, in a desperate bid to save her own skin, had thrown him under the bus during the investigation, claiming he had pressured her into everything. "My life is ruined, Em," he pleaded, his voice cracking with self-pity. "Everything is gone. My career, my reputation, all of it." He reached out as if to touch my hand, but I instinctively pulled it back. "And you came all the way up here for what? Sympathy?" "No," he said, his eyes wild with a new, raw urgency. "I came here for you. I was wrong, Em. I know that now. I love you. I've always loved you. We can start over. A fresh start, somewhere new." I just stared at him, my silence a wall he couldn't penetrate. And then, the real reason for his pilgrimage tumbled out. "The company is suing me," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "For the money they invested and lost on Pegasus. My lawyer says I'm facing financial ruin. They're claiming I committed fraud." He took a step closer, his desperation palpable. "I need you to help me, Emma. I need you to testify. To tell them it was our idea all along. A joint project. That we developed it together when we were married. It's the only way I can fight this. Please, Em. For the sake of everything we once had. Save me." And there it was. The ugly, unvarnished truth. Not love. Not remorse. Self-preservation. He wasn't here to reclaim his lost love, he was here to use me one last time as a shield to save himself. A strange, liberating calm settled over me. All the residual fear, all the lingering hurt, it all vanished, burned away by the heat of my quiet rage. It was replaced by a diamond-hard clarity. "You're right about one thing, Mark," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "It was a joint project. You just forgot to tell me I was on the team." He looked at me, confused. "What are you talking about? You asked me to email my ideas to you, remember?" I continued, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the noise of the fair. "You said you needed them in my words. Well, I still have them." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My fingers, once shaky in his presence, were now perfectly steady. I opened my email app, navigated to my sent folder, and found the message I had sent him more than a year and a half ago. I turned the screen so he could see it. There it was, in crisp, black and white, a digital ghost come back to haunt him. From Emma Reynolds to Mark Reynolds sent, October 17, 2018, 9:22 a.m. Subject, some ideas for Pegasus. The full, 6-page document was attached. The timestamp was a digital tombstone for his lies. "I believe," I said, my voice resonating with a power I didn't know I possessed, "that this is what the kids today call a receipt. You can show this to your lawyer. It proves, without a shadow of a doubt, exactly who the author of that project was." The color drained from Mark's face. He stared at the phone screen, his mouth opening and closing silently like a fish gasping for air. The charming, manipulative man was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out shell. He had walked right into my trap, a trap built from his own words and his own deceit. The truth, in the end, was the only weapon I had ever needed.